My name's Adam. I own Denton Racing in Phoenix, Arizona, and I build Jeeps. But this one has an LS in it. So this is my 2009 Two Door Wrangler. I got it back in 2011. It started out as a bone stock Rubicon, and now it's kind of morphed into this. I originally did a long arm kit and a supercharged V6, and I quickly ran out of power and I decided to stretch the wheelbase a little bit more. So I pushed the front axle forward 4 inches and the rear axle went back about 5 or 6, give or take. But then I ended up changing out the axles. I started out with stock Rubicon axles, and then I went to some Super Duty junkyard axles, which lasted about a month before I ended up getting with Currie, and we designed the 74-inch wide rockjock 70/60 package. It runs a 3-link front suspension with a Genright steering kit, Genright track bar kit, 538 gears in the front axle with an ARB locker. The knuckles are Currie aluminum knuckles with a Stop Tech 4-piston brake kit, and then it's sprung with King coilovers and King bump stops. The rear is a 4-link rear suspension that we built in-house. Same thing, 538 gears, ARB lockers, and King coilovers with King bump stops. The exhaust system kind of routes as close as we could to the body, and then Ron Davis built us a custom dual fan aluminum transcooler that actually goes in the location that used to be the storage unit for the tire jack. And then we ended up we redid all the brake lines, hard lined along the axle. So in stretching the rear axle, we ended up building custom corners to allow us to clear a 40-inch tire or a 42-inch tire. It has 2 different sets. The shocks we actually tied into the roll cage that worked through the actual wheel well, and the whole side of the Jeep is actually 3/16 steel that's welded to the body, and then it has been painted and tied into the rocker and step. The sway bar has been mounted up out of the way. It's a Genright rear sway bar kit that we modified to fit this chassis. Much past the sway bar, we actually cut the frame right where technically the rear seats would be in this 2-door. Past that, it's all tube work, and then it ties into the roll cage that is welded in 4 points to the frame. So it's actually a solid mounted roll cage. We ended up moving the fuel cell to the back. It houses a Aeromotive dual pump kit, and it still uses the factory fuel level sensor so that the gauge on the dash works. We did a custom stereo enclosure to cover up our battery that's mounted underneath, and the only thing that really shows through is the coilover mounts and the 2 bump stop mounts that come through right on the sides of the speaker box. The hardtop still does fit. We had to trim it a little bit, but it's a little more of a pain to come off, but it does seal properly to the cage. I probably would change it now. This cage is about 4 or 5 years old. There's a little less headroom with the factory seats in here. But the dash mostly remains stock. We did a Genright steering wheel mount kit, and then we built a custom shifter for our 4L80 manual valve body. To retain the factory controls, we work with RPM Extreme out of Alabama, working with him for a number of years to custom tailor each wiring harness for each one of these conversions, depending on if it's supercharged or naturally aspirated. It does run a standard Atlas JK shifter kit, and then we have a Switch Pros on a custom mount on the roll bar and a edge screen for monitoring vital engine data. But other than that, it's pretty tame in the interior. The heater, AC, all that stuff still works. You can roll the power windows up and down, still cruise down the freeway at 80, 85, and still listen to the stereo. I mean, once you crack the throttle though, it does get pretty deafening inside, but that just comes with the territory. I'm still actually changing things on this Jeep to improve, push the envelope, and kind of make it work better. So I had a 14-inch coilover on the front of this in the beginning, and I went down to a 12, hence the freshly welded on shock mounts. One of my local buddies, Jason Willis, actually cut off what was there before, and then we ended up doing these plate shock mounts that were similar to the ones that our friends over at Genright Off-Road designed. The 12-inch shock gives you a little more room in the engine bay to allow you to have some more freedom for other accessories. So the engine is a Mast Motorsports built 427. It's about 9.5 to 1 compression, topped off with a Whipple Supercharger. Callie's fully forged rotating assembly, Mast 285cc heads, ID 1050 injectors, and we're running a 2 3/4 pulley. It's good for about 15, 16 pounds of boost. Obviously packaging is pretty tight in here, so we had to do a remote mounted throttle body and kind of move the radiator a little farther forward to fit all that in here. This exhaust system was built by a local shop here, Ryan Linder. He did the full stainless long tube headers to dual 3.5-inch exhaust all the way back with 4 magnaflow mufflers. It's pretty loud. Anything above 3,500, $4,000, and it'll rattle the walls. But this motor does about right at 1,000 horsepower, depending on the fuel that's in it. On 91, it's obviously quite a bit less, but 100 or C16, it'll be right there with 4 digits. And then the harness that we use fully integrates this engine into the dash, so everything factory works. Cruise control, air conditioning, the cluster, fuel level gauge, coolant, RPM, even the check engine light will display codes for this engine on that dash. And then we just obviously kind of removed everything out of the engine bay that wasn't absolutely necessary to fit the shocks, motor, and coolant tank for the Supercharger. As far as tuning goes, Cortez Performance handles all of my engine tuning. Each LS swap that I do is custom tuned before it leaves here, because I don't believe that they all run exactly the same. Some of them have their own little tweaks, some of them make more power than others do, and they have been super helpful in making sure that every customer is satisfied with their swap. They tuned this one, and it's never ran better. Joe and the guys over there are an excellent crew. They build easily 4-digit GM performance cars all day long, so I knew that they would have no problem helping me out with these ones. Quite often, a lot of people have asked me if this package would be available for standard JK swap. It's kind of a hard question, because you're essentially building a high horsepower street car and then adding in all of the complications of building a 4-wheel drive vehicle. And obviously packaging in the Wrangler is not lend itself for a large amount of cooling. The radiator is pretty much the largest you could fit in this front end. The grill is not flow quite enough air. In the summertime when it's 110, 115 out here, this Jeep runs about 225. If you get on it pretty hard, it'll be about 230. I've entertained the thought of building a larger radiator, but I still wanted it to be filled with products that I can use in my day-to-day swaps for typically anyone else that would walk through the door. This motor just requires a little bit of maintenance, and just knowing that there are going to be slight quirks about it. It's not going to be something you're going to get in every day for a year or two and not have anything that you need to actively keep up on. Generally we do 427 naturally aspirated swaps, 416 LS3s, and those motors make plenty of power. Our 416 600 package does about 610, 620 on an engine dyno. The 427s will do about 690 to 700, and those will be easily less maintenance than a supercharged version of this. They run a lot cooler. There's not the complications of an intercooler system or doubling up on a fuel system to make them package and fit right. Your fuel economy will be quite improved. This one gets about 90 to 100 miles to a tank, and it's on a 20-gallon tank. So you're not going very far with this. It's definitely, you're carrying spare gas on a trail, or in town you're frequenting the gas station. But it is a lot of fun to drive, so I really just built this to push the limits of the products that I developed to make these swaps happen with the higher horsepower LS engines that we use, instead of being stuck with stock LS3s as far as what a lot of these conversions are. So if you guys want more information, we'll be doing more of these videos, walkarounds of builds I've done in the past, builds I have coming up. We actually have a 416 600 package stroker engine that's coming through our shop right now from a customer in Seattle. We'll be videoing that build and giving you guys an insight into what goes into one of these conversions. So hit that subscribe button so that way you'll be able to get notifications for when we have more information coming out. We'll also be doing a walk around of our cammed LS3 swap we did for one of our good customers in the Valley, and then we also did a 6-liter conversion for another close friend of ours, and we'll be giving you build breakdowns on both of those. But we're hoping to give you a little more information into what actually goes into these conversions, and a little in-depth as to assembly, parts that we use, manufacturers we work with, really what suits each customer's goal for each one of their swaps. I feel like everybody's a little bit different, and everybody's looking for something a little bit different, and we're just hoping to get you into that right direction.